Hello, everyone, and welcome to Games and Sims, Games and Ethics, or Ethics and Games. And tonight, it's with Sherry Jones. Yay! So we'll go ahead and get started. Go ahead, Sherry.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, so, all right, so this presentation, we're going to do a monthly series, and today's presentation is on Fallout Shelter. So that is a screenshot of the in-game graphics. So it's a mobile game, so keep that in mind as we go through the slides, okay? So please go next. Okay, so this is actually the starting screen when you get into the mobile game. So it just says, welcome to Fallout Shelter. And I named my vault 761, which actually goes against the narrative of Fallout. It doesn't make sense as 761, but since it's a mobile game, I get to do that. Okay, so let's discuss what exactly is Fallout. So please go next. Okay, so Fallout Shelter actually is a mobile game that came out in 2015. It's a free-to-play simulation mobile game by Bethesda Game Studios and Behavior Interactive. So it's a collaboration between the two companies. And it's actually a spin-off of the entire Fallout game series. So Fallout 4 just came out, but there's lots and lots of spin-off because this is a big universe of game. Lots of stories that goes with this series. So it's released on Android, iOS, Microsoft Windows, and Xbox One. So pretty much you can play on any mobile device or download it, from Steam and so forth. It's a simulation of a post-nuclear apocalyptic America. And the gameplay mainly is building and maintaining a fallout shelter. So you're trying to maintain people in the fallout shelter, not allow them to die, right? Fight monsters and so forth, and try to build your shelter as big as possible. So please go next. Okay, so it's set in the alternate history of United States in the 1950s. So alternate history in the discipline of history is the idea that it's the what if. What if history went this direction rather than this other direction? Okay, so it's a fictionalized version of the United States in the 1950s. Okay, in the 1950s, it's called the Atomic Age, when basically all their technologies are run by nuclear energy. And in this part, this kind of history, there are actually 13 commonwealths that rule the United States in the story. So those 13 commonwealths, each commonwealth ruled several states, okay? And they were doing okay until capitalism and plutocracy corrupted US into a fascist police state. So I think most of us know what capitalism is. Plutocracy is the idea that the most wealthy rule society. Okay, so that's a plutocracy. So what ensued after the corruption began is that surveillance, torture, experimentation, public execution became the du jour citizen control methods. So the government started to do this openly and did this to all its citizens, okay? Then in 2077, in the game timeline, a great war occurred on a global scale and launched into a nuclear apocalypse. And it was initiated by United States, China, USSR, because again, the game was set right in the 1950s and the timeline started there. So USSR is still intact. And the other nuclear capable nations decide to launch all their weapons at once for 2 hours. That's what the Great War was. So if you can go next. Okay, so in the storyline, because I couldn't squeeze everything in there, the narrative is very, very rich. Supposedly, after the estimation, the United States did an estimation and decided that they needed to build 400,000 vaults in order to save all its citizens. But they contracted this company, Vault Tech, to build the vaults, but they ended up only building 122 vaults. So only 1,000 people lived inside those vaults. So 1,000 survived, lived in the 122 vaults. However, the vaults were actually the sites of unethical social and scientific experiments. So I listed a few here. This is not the only thing that they did, but they turned the residents in the vault into mutants. Some of them were fed psychopathic drugs. Some of them were infected with viruses. Some of them were given radiation, okay? So the surface at this time is called also the wasteland. That's the term for above ground, above the vault, became completely irradiated. So the surface survivors are now called ghouls. So ghouls are not They're not exactly ghost-like, but they look like zombies because their skin started to burn off due to radiation, and they started to lose their sanity. So the other term for them is called ghouls. And these vaults, the one that were built, okay, that were released like in before 2077, because the Great War happened in 2077. They were not open until 2097 and later, because the first Fallout game, the first vault that was open was in 2097. So in this series, in this entire canon, it is not clear when Fallout Shelter falls on the timeline of the great universe of Fallout. But we know that there are lots of references of all 4 games inside Fallout Shelter. So we can probably imagine it's after like 2200, the year 2200 when this happened. So keep going next. Thanks. So here's the next section. We're going to talk a bit about the game design. So this game is actually inspired by the politics and culture of the 1950s. So please go next. All right. So during the 1950s, okay, and this, we're talking about real US history right now, okay, there is this culture of war and culture of fear. So US sentiments during this time, and I'm, post World War II. So World War II is from 1939 to 1945. So after World War II, during this time, we have a lot of these sentiments: national and racial destiny, national solidarity, fear of degenerates. So degenerates are people who may be immoral, right? Fear of outsiders, paranoia, expansion of military power, infallible or unquestionable leaders, authoritarianism, racism, and sexism. What's really scary about the things I've listed here, about the yeah, is my voice going there?
Yeah, you're going now. Okay.
Okay. So you can go back to the slides. Okay. So are the slides up, Chris?
Yeah, it looks like we're having a little bit of an issue here for me sharing the slides. Let
Okay.
me try to refresh them real quick.
Okay. 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 Thank you, Kay. I'll go through Kay's slides. So if my voice went away, what I was saying earlier was that the US sentiments during 1950s post World War II, the ideas I've listed, such as national and racial destiny, national solidarity, authoritarianism, racism, sexism, all those things are resurging again today. So we can't really say that none of them are not there anymore. They seem to be resurging, or that they have never gone away. So that's the scary part of studying what's happening in the 1950s and thinking about our politics, our political climate today. The other thing that happened in the 1950s was the Red Scare. The Red Scare was the second version of Red Scare. So there was 2 versions, but I'm talking about the second one, which is the campaign launched by Senator McCarthy. And he launched this campaign to identify secret communist traitors in the US. But the other thing I couldn't squeeze into the slides was he was also identifying anyone who sympathize with communist ideas. So they don't really have to say I'm a communist, but anyone who sympathize or usurp the ideals of United States Senate, for example, are identified as communists. And the term McCarthyism came from this. It was actually coined by a cartoonist. Basically, the idea that you can launch accusations of treason against anyone without any evidence. And that basically was describing what Senator McCarthy did. Then we also had the fear of atomic bomb and US nuclear fallout. Okay, so During this time, those are all the things that are happening in the 1950s culture. And the game designers were brilliant to fold all these ideas into the design of their series. And now that I've mentioned also a nuclear fallout survival guide, I think that it would be helpful for us to actually see a real fallout survival guide. So if we can go next. Okay, so I went to the National Archives, and National Archive is really wonderful in releasing all these old documents for us. And I only took this is actually a pamphlet that we're looking at right now. And I took page 1 and page 6 from the pamphlet. And after our presentation, the links to all of these sources will be available for you to check it out. But it says right there, if you can't see that, this pamphlet is teaching Americans how to protect themselves if a nuclear fallout actually occurs. So on the top right, it says an ordinary frame house will offer some protection. It may cut radiation danger by about 1/2. Get on the floor away from doors and windows, or preferably go to a location with additional walls at the center of the house. So as if being in the center of the house would do something, would protect yourself from fallout. The other ones are silly, like basement shelter. So they try to draw drawings there. The ideal situations at the bottom right, where it says an underground shelter with 3 feet of earth above it will give you almost complete protection if it is equipped with a door and an air filter. And then the bottom left is the saddest one, which is if you don't have time to evacuate, seek the best available shelter, okay? That's pretty much a death sentence, but that's the best they can do since they can't put everyone in a shelter, okay? So this is an actual pamphlet we're looking at. So we can keep going next. Okay, so this is a photograph of a house at the Nevada testing site. So the United States during the 1950s and 60s did a series of nuclear experiments in Nevada. And it's actually extremely bad that they did this. And we'll talk about the physics of it in just a second. But this is actually a house that's at the testing site. If you can go next. Okay. This is actually the bomb that was thrown at that house. Okay, few minutes, and this the bomb that's thrown. It's called Operation Q. So that's done in 1955. You can go next. Okay, and this is what the house looked like after you throw a bomb at it. So I'm not really sure what's the point of being in the center of the house, even if your house is not destroyed to this site. It's very hard to avoid the fallout of a nuclear bomb. So if we can go next. Okay. So here's a photograph of actually where it says the Office of Civil and Defense Mobilization Exhibit. So the Office of Civil and Defense Mobilization actually put out fairs where they're trying to sell people family fallout shelters or educate them on what kind of shelters are out there. And if we can go next. Okay, this is a photograph of a woman selling survival supplies. So things that you can eat or med kit that you can put into your shelter. Please go next. Oop. There you go. And this is the actual shelter. Okay, this is actually a family shelter that they sold. And according to the information from National Archives, what they have stocked on the shelf is supposed to last a family 14 days. Now, it sounds great. The problem is that 14 days is not going to protect you from nuclear fallout because the fallout doesn't disappear or dissipate within 14 days. So please go next. Okay, now this is actually from the CDC. I thought this would be fun if we took the 1950s, 1960s information and also parallel that with what we can currently find on the CDC website in 2018, okay? And this is what they admit about the global fallout. So I'll read a little bit here. It says, before 1963, the US and other countries conducted more than 500 nuclear weapons tests in the atmosphere. During these tests, radioactive particles and gases were spread in the atmosphere. Depending on the size and type of weapon that was exploded, some of these particles and gases travel great distances before falling to Earth, called fallout. So fallout specifically refers to those particles that is falling to the Earth, travel through air, and travel by water. That's what those things are. Now, what's happening there is that, and I'm going to skip a little bit here. It says, The study found that any person living in the contiguous United States since 1951 has been exposed to some radioactive fallout. And all of the person's organs and tissue have received some exposure. So lucky us, all of us who live in the United States right now have radioactive exposure or been exposed to radiation due to the tests that the United States and other countries have conducted. So please go next. Okay, and right there, I wanted to show you what happens when you get contaminated. The thyroid, your thyroid is if you receive radiation, you immediately get thyroid cancer, as well as your bone marrow. Okay, and it shows you what's happening there, which is that supposedly some people may have an increased risk of cancer from this exposure. So you would think that with the rise of cancer incidence in current time, we wonder if some of these nuclear testing that started in the 1950s, okay, had an effect on future generation, because the radioactive particles hasn't completely dissipated yet. They're still spreading everywhere, and it's very hard for us to trace the cause. So please go next. Okay, so one thing you can do for yourself, I'm not suggesting that everyone should go out and buy this, but if you're paranoid, one thing you can go out and buy on Amazon or other sites is potassium iodide. Okay, potassium iodide is something that they prescribe to patients with thyroid problems, but it's also something that soldiers, United States soldiers, actually carry with them. These pills when they go to countries that might release radiation. Okay, might have radioactive weapons. So it blocks radioactive iodine from entering the thyroid. But here's the kicker, okay? CDC recommends this, and emergency kits will tell you to eat this thing. But you can only eat it probably 6 days, because after you eat it for more than 6 days, you develop cancer anyway. So you're not supposed to eat it for a very long time. So it's not very permanent solution. Please go next. Okay, so I also wanted to give a little bit of information about Chernobyl, because one of the natural questions we should ask is, okay, so if a nuclear weapon is dropped or if a nuclear plant melted, okay, how long would the fallout stick around? The question is very complicated because based on my research, there are different elements, right? Different radioactive elements as used to create weapons. So unless we know what elements are inside the weapons, we don't exactly know what is the half-life of the isotopes in the element. So half-life of an isotope is the idea of how long it would take, right? That the radiation would dissipate or lessen in degree. So there's different half-lives. Certain things, certain elements, certain isotopes, the half-life is 8 days. Other isotope could be 1,000,000 years. So it's very hard for us to say how long it would take for us to stay under in an underground vault to avoid fallout. So Chernobyl was a great example because it's still, this was an article from 2016, and it says that we still have radiation coming out of it from reactor 4 at Chernobyl. So Russia is already building the superstructure that's supposed to contain the radiation for another 100 years. Now, keep in mind, it's been 30 years since the Chernobyl accident. So even 30 years have passed, we still have radiation leaking, right? Leaking from the site, and also radiation spreading everywhere. So in terms of how long can you stay or how long should you stay in a shelter, it's very, very hard to say. Okay, so keep going next. Okay, so Fallout Shelter is really a very curious game. So I'm going to explain why it's a curious game. So please go next. Okay, so first of all, in the original, in 1, 2, 3, 4, in Fallout 1 through 4, the player takes on the role of a dweller, right? And usually the dweller leads the Vault-Tec vault. Because let me remind everyone, the original story is that the Vault-Tec vaults were built by the United States government, and they were basically experimental rooms to see how long people can endure radiation, viruses, diseases, and so forth. So they're pretty evil things, right? But in this particular mobile game, you are taking on the role of the overseer who maintains the vault like this. So since we know that vaults are pretty much unethical things, it's really weird, right, that Bethesda Game Studios would make a mobile game about building and maintaining such a vault. Because it sounds innocuous, but after you read the history, you realize these are pretty evil experimentation sites. So then the next question would be, what exactly would be the motivation to survive a nuclear apocalyptic wasteland, right? When everything is radio. Why would you want to keep living? So keep going next. All right. So I took the screenshot. I thought that'd be fun. The character asked, people actually live out here? And I thought that would be a perfect question to pose, as in, why are we still living? So keep going next. Okay. So there's two ways to play this game. Okay. One way is to play the game with complicity. So you know you're the overseer, you play as the overseer, and you have absolute power over all the dwellers. So you can do whatever you want, okay? You can do ethical acts or unethical acts. So one way to see it is to experience what it is like to be complicit, okay? And one of the example I give you, and many examples, is that you can evict dwellers for the sake of caps. So you can evict certain dwellers in order to make more money. Which I've done many times. Now, the other way to play this game is to play with resistance. Knowing that you can perform ethical or unethical acts, you decided to be ethical, right? But you do get punished because of the way the game is designed. So for example, you might sacrifice chances to earn more money by refusing to evict dwellers. So there are the two primary ways to play this game. So please go next. Okay. So let me show you screenshots of the game world, how the game is divided. So please go next. This is the vault. So this is a slice view. When you open up your mobile game, this is actually what you will see. These are the actual individual vault rooms that you build and maintain. Next. Okay. This is the barrack room. Barrack room is where people live, but pretty much in the game is where you make babies. So you can actually put dwellers together and they woohoo and they make babies in these rooms. Next. Okay, this is the Nuka-Cola room. This is one of the rooms that you can build to sustain the population. And literally it's made by the Nuka-Cola Corporation, okay? And they basically, it sounds like Nuka-Cola, there's radiated stuff inside this Coke, but if you drink it, it sustains you for food and water. And you notice that the ideal outfit that you're supposed to get your dwellers to wear to work in this room is the radiation-proof suit, because it's pretty toxic, but that's what they eat to survive. Next. Please go next. There you go. Okay. So this is also a hair salon. Oh, go back. Okay, there we go. This is a hair salon that's in the vault. If you notice that it has a 1984 vibe to it, there is a monitor right there that's looking at you. There is actually a machine that's cutting your hair, but it does have that cultural feel of the 1950s. If you notice all the artifacts that's inside this room. Next. Okay, this is the overseer room. The funny thing is you're the overseer, so technically no one really sits inside this room, but it can show you that the overseer has control and monitors to monitor anyone inside his vault. So basically he's the controller. Next. Okay, now another part of the game is the wasteland. So you notice that the wasteland is literally wasteland. There's nothing growing. That's pretty much about right. If a nuclear fire happened, I think nothing will be growing. So next. Okay, this is an example of a place that still exists after the fallout. So it's Red Rocket, which I think the inspiration, and I'm just guessing here, it's probably that restaurant Johnny Rocket with Red Robins or something combined. But it's basically a restaurant that's out there. And obviously there's no food. You're just there to forage for food. Next. Okay. Now, this is another one, Super Duper Mart. So it just represents a marketplace, supermarket that you can grab food from or objects from. Next. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about characters. Please go next. Okay, so this is an example of dwellers. And the dwellers say, Serving the vault and the overseer, hooray. So that's all they do is they serve the vault and the overseer. That's pretty much a good representation of the dwellers. Next. Okay. This is Mr. Handy. So Mr. Handy is a robot that you can actually employ in your game. And Mr. Handy does everything. He cleans after you. He cleans the vault room. He will take care of your babies. He will give you food and water. That's what he is. But if you notice right there, he introduced himself and said, I'm the pride, right? Pride of General Atomics International. So he's associated with the US government, the same people who released the atomic bomb in the storyline. Okay, next. Okay, so here's another shot of the dwellers working with Mr. Handy. Live to serve, serve to live. Next. Okay, this is Bottle. He's a mascot from this amusement park called Nuka World, and that came out of the Fallout 4, which is currently being sold right now. Okay, so he's a new character, but what he does is he comes around and look at your vault. He doesn't really have any other attribute except that he'll sometimes give you vaults if you click on him. Okay, so next. And the other guy is Cap. So he's representation of money. And in this storyline, the old money, what they call old money, is the original US money, is no longer being used. In this world, people use bottle caps as currency, and they use bottle caps to pay for stuff. Okay, next. All right, so here's the mechanics part, and I'll go through these fast. Okay, so next. All right, so this is a screenshot of the dwellers and their jobs. So when you open up the stats to examine your dwellers, the only thing that matters really is if you're looking at the jobs that they're doing. There are specials, their state of happiness and stats, right? So the happiness tells you how happy they are and how much willing they are, how long they'll be willing to work at that job. So you have to maintain all this stuff. But at the very right side, you can see that the only thing that really matters is the jobs that you assign them. Next. Okay, now let me introduce everyone to this very special thing called the special. The special skill system is a unique set that came out of the Fallout game series. It's a very famous special set that influenced other game design. Okay, so special stands for strength, perception, endurance, charisma, intelligence, agility, and luck. So based on the special stats of these characters, some of them can fight longer than others, some of them can work longer than others. Next. Okay, this is the outfit and skills set. So you can wear certain outfits to increase your skill set. So that's their skill screen. Next. Okay, this is junk. They call it junk, but these are the things you collect from the wasteland to make your weapons and your outfit. Next. All right. Then, in order to, sometimes you will send your dwellers out to go to the wasteland to forage for caps or weapons or junk and so forth. But when you want to know, keep up with what they're doing, you can actually look at their journal. So this is a journal where this dweller is trying to say, this is what happened to me, this is what I got, and underneath he'll show you all the merchandise and things that he was able to grab from the wasteland. Next. Okay, so here's an example of what you do to the dweller. So the dweller's out there in the wasteland, and he's trying to fight to obtain resources. That's actually how he does that. So you put them there, he's fighting with his cat, whatever the cat does. Next. Okay, you can also speak to strangers in the wasteland using this branching narrative. Okay, and some of the narrative, some of the dialogue does lead you to certain actions, but they're just there for fun, really. They tell you what's happening and they reveal the cultural attitude of the people of that time. Next. Okay, so here are the quests, type of quests. So some of the quests in this screenshot, for example, they will tell you to go Guardian of the Wastes, mole rats. Get rid of these pesky mole rats. So you will send somebody off to go kill off mole rats. And the other one says monster under the bed, track down and kill a teddy bear stealing monster. So there are the little quests that they give you so that the game doesn't just feel like you're just building a bunch of vault rooms. Okay, next. And when you're playing inside the vault, sometimes there'll be side quests where the game will pull you out and say, hey, go on this quest to go get caps. So that's what the screen will look like when it shows up. Next. Okay, so this would be once you finish a quest, it will ask you to continue exploring the wasteland to get more caps. That's what that screen is. Okay, now I put this one on here, even though I already introduced a narrative, branching narrative, because this is really sad, okay? It says, cram, seriously, ooh, I love me some cram, don't mind if I do. Cram is basically their version of spam. In the third line, it says, you do realize that stuff is like 200 years old. So that tells you how sad it is living in this future where people are foraging for stuff that's 200 years old. And I highly doubt that spam would live for 200 years. I mean, I would assume it probably disintegrated by that time. But in this storyline, that's what they're eating. Okay, next. Okay, enemies. So we go next. All right, so here are the things that invade in your vault. So the vault is not a peaceful place. You think you're safe, but once in a while you get attacked by these things. So one of the things is rad roaches. Rad, radiated, right? Radiated roaches. They're huge like dogs. Next. You have scorpions. Yes, they're bigger than dogs. Notice the cat versus a scorpion. They're humongous. Next. Okay, mole rats. It's funny that the game designers put mole rats in the game because current research shows that mole rats actually do not age. And they're very important animals in our experimentation and research on aging. So aging research currently focus on mole rats. So I thought it was ingenious for the game designers to put mole rats as one of the surviving animals in the future. Next. Okay, and there's these ghouls. So those people who turn half zombie would attack your vault to get food or steal food from you, or try to eat your brain. Okay, next. All right, and these are death claws. I don't know what they are really, but they just come out and hurt you. And they're one of the most dangerous monsters you can encounter. They'll swipe at you and half of your life is gone. So they're pretty dangerous. Next. Okay, and then raiders. So there are vault dwellers and there are raiders. So raiders are people who will come and just steal and disrupt your vault. So they're the people who are in the lost wasteland, right? And there are more different types of enemies out there, but I'm not going to spend all that time talking about enemies. I just want to show you not only do we confront enemies of animal, monster, creatures, and so forth, but we also confront other people. Next. Okay, so we're getting to the game rhetoric section, and I'm hoping that either Chris K here would help read some of this so I don't read the whole time. So this particular section is on the rhetoric that the game expresses on job, productivity, and efficiency. So can one of us take over? Maybe Chris? I don't know.
Sure, I can go ahead.
Thank you.
So you see here in the game, obviously, working equals happiness. The more you work, the happier you'll be. Every day, I like that. Every day's a good job when I'm on the. Every day's a good day when I'm on the job. So if you keep your people employed, they'll be happy.
Yes.
Hard work is happy work, so you need to give them challenging work. This sounds familiar for some reason. I don't know why. Challenge your employees. Next up is the vault conversations. Goat. The goat was right. This is the perfect job for me.
And let me add to help Chris out here. The GOAT is actually a reference to a test that was released in Fallout 3. Okay, and GOAT stands for General Occupation Assessment Test. And this is a very, very evil test. Basically, it's a test to see what your testing level or your skill set are. And based on the test, it will assign you to jobs. So in this future, if you're a vault dweller, you don't get to select what job you want to take. It's a test that determines this. But the test is full of questions that are nonsensical. Okay. And it makes no sense. And people just get assigned to wherever they want to go. And I think in parallel, when I played Fallout 3, I immediately thought of some of our fear in education about using assessment to determine what degree or what classes students need to take. It's very similar in that vein of conversation.
Or it's also the pathways. You think of it as rigid pathways. Some of the very rigid pathway models that you see in some educational areas.
Right.
So that'd be another place you could look at that. For me, whenever I thought of the goat, it was more of the personality assessments or the strength finder type stuff that you took, or the career finder type quizzes that you took whenever you're in high school to go, what job would appeal to you? So more production. You see this person over here. If I weren't working here today, if I weren't working here, production wouldn't be nearly so good.
Right. So protection is a key feature in this game.
So in other words, it's not just doing business it's not just doing things to stay busy. It's doing things to actually be productive.
Yes.
And then maximum efficiency. So everyone has to be efficient. So, gee, it sounds like a normal workplace. You want people to be happy. You want people to be productive. You want people to be efficient.
Yes.
And challenged with their jobs. And humans are inefficient, of course. As you can see, here's the robot going, you humans are dreadfully inefficient. My advice, a graduated robot replacement system.
And I added this particular shot because I think that would be the logical end of technology, because we're never going to be as efficient as robots. And I think from the neuroscience, right, research, and it's debatable, okay? Supposedly our brain can only hold 1 gigabyte of information, and we could buy flash drives that have way more gigabytes than that. So that shows that our brain has specific limitation on how much memory we can store. Remember, this information though is debated exactly how many gigabyte our brain can hold. But you can see that in the future, if everything is technology oriented, like we're doing right now, the eventual end of us is probably going to be robot replacement. That's pretty depressing.
Unless a singularity happens and you're able to upload your consciousness to the cloud. There you go.
Okay, so who maybe Chris can continue, or someone else, please take over. And this particular is on game rhetoric, particularly about the omniscient overseer deserving praise.
I can jump in. This is Lear.
Okay.
Vault Conversations. Who is the overseer? A drawing of the overseer. Now that would be something. And here we see Nuka-Cola, right?
Yes, to speed them up. Each character can be sped up in their growth with Nuka-Cola. But what I wanted to add on to that particular shot is that the dwellers are working for an overseer who they don't even know what they look like, right? Because you wouldn't be asking for a drawing if you knew what the overseer looks like. So they're working blindly for someone they don't know. Okay, so please keep going.
Vault Conversations. The overseer is smart. The overseer really made a smart move assigning me here.
Yeah, so the overseer controls everything. So your job, your life is basically assigned by the overseer, and also the overseer is awesome for these dwellers. Please go next.
I'm writing a new song praising the overseer. I need a word that rhymes with great. What's interesting is some of these little narratives map to the objectives, and I've only played for 12 hours or so, but I did find it interesting that they approve of some of your decisions, and you see these phrases. The overseer will protect us. Of course we are. The overseer would never let anything happen to us.
Right. And this is just the perception, right? Their perception of exactly what the overseer can do. The overseer seems to be magical in this world.
And here they're increasing luck. Yeah.
Right. So whoever want to take over, this section is about surveillance now.
Okay, I can go ahead and talk about surveillance. All right, so first thing we got, army room with surveilling cameras. There's cameras everywhere.
Now, can you see the camera?
Yep, up in the upper right-hand corner.
It took me a while. I honestly did not see them until I zoomed in and like took a screenshot, a photo, from my phone. And apparently, in every little room, if you look very carefully, there are surveillance cameras or monitors everywhere. So yeah, please go next.
Weapons room with monitors.
Yeah, and the monitor, if you can see, it's really hard to see, but the monitor is showing the room.
Upper right again. And actually, it's very common. I mean, it's what's interesting is that it does duplicate a lot of today's security protocols, where whenever you're in a place that has electronic surveillance, usually there's some monitor that's showing you a live feed from the camera. That's
Right.
like, hey, look, you're on camera.
Yep.
Overseer is listening. So that's kind of interesting. You have the little conversation they're saying, how's it going, you ask? Why, it's going fantastic. Play along. The overseer might be listening.
Yeah.
So you're getting a hint that maybe things aren't as perfect as everyone's plastered on smile looks like.
Exactly.
Overseer and the double shift. Here in the bar, we say, shh, don't let the overseer hear. You'll get assigned a double shift. And overseer's watching us. Stay sharp. The overseer's watching us.
Right.
So again, monitored employees are always the most productive, I'm sure. We all know that.
Indeed.
Especially as we start getting into the a certain certain college playoff season here in the spring. That happens with everyone's brackets.
So our little next section here, authoritarianism and hive mind is also present, and either Cynthia, Lear, or Kay can take over.
Oh, sure, I'll jump in. This is Lear. Vault conversations follow authority. Fine by me. I'll blindly follow anyone with a title and authority. She almost looks like a cat person in that outfit.
Oh, the person on the right? Yeah. It's actually armor, but yeah, it's a little weird.
But look at the ears on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Busy as a bee tucked away in a subterranean steel honeycomb. It's the hive mind.
Yeah, I thought that was a great explanation of exactly what they are. They basically are worker bees, right? That's what the game is admitting. You're turning people into worker bees. What next? Yeah,
The
and
vault.
I added, right.
Oh,
I'm not sorry. The vault here, I just added this particular shot to demonstrate when I first played the game, and I don't know if Lear is getting this impression too. I thought I was running an ant farm because these vaults, you could go left, right, up, and down, but basically you're not supposed to leave. So you just live there, and a lot of them die in there. So it's just a giant ant farm. But later, when I saw that the game admitted it's like a honeycomb and bee workers, I start to make that connection. Go, oh, that's what it's supposed to be doing.
And yours looks so tidy. My first one was not so tidy.
I played for months. Okay, so the next section is on game rhetoric, nuclear energy, and radiation. So in this future, they're still using nuclear energy. So, yeah. So maybe Chris or Kay or...
Sure, I'll go ahead. So sanity of irradiated ghouls. So the radiation changed all of us, but we still have our sanity. The others had us trapped here.
Okay, so what this is saying here, these ghouls, I mean, they look like zombies, right? The depiction of them look like zombies. But the sad part is they're just human beings who are slowly losing their sanity due to radiation. And some of them are still sane. So it's really weird to try to figure out if a zombie is sane or not, and you're trying to figure out if you can exchange goods with them or kill them.
Like, okay, so we wait until they bite us, and then we can. Atomic energy again. And then the robot says, oh yes, let's develop atomic energy because it worked out so well before.
Yeah.
Those who don't know the history, I don't remember the history. Again, managing radiation. Having to manage radiation in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, clearly someone needs to evolve. There's the robot there, always justifying why we need more robots.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Mr. Handy explodes. No!
I added this because if, over on the left-hand side, it's hard to see there, but there's a rat scorpion. Yeah. And the scorpion, sometimes when there's a scorpion attacking or animal attacking, Mr. Handy will come out and try to attack that thing, right? But if Mr. Handy dies, right, well, he breaks down, he explodes. And the funny thing is that they depict his explosion like a nuclear explosion. Mm-hmm. Constantly reminding you this place is messed up.
Well, and he's also powered by atomic energy. So, of course, that's also something as well.
Right. Okay, next section is on privilege and naivete.
I'll jump in.
Okay.
Wasteland conversations dusting. Would it kill them to dust every now and then?
When I put Wasteland, is that the vault dwellers are stuck in the vault. And they have these weird illusion of what the overseer is, right? And what the vault is supposed to be. And they live in a fantasy world. So when the overseer throw them out into the wasteland, this is the kind of conversation that they have to show, basically showing that they are really, really naive and really privileged in the way they talk.
I think they need to fire their maid.
Yeah.
Life used to be so simple. Power, water, food. Now look at me.
Right. And naiveness.
I was promised an adventure. Someone lied.
Yeah, they have no idea what they're in for. Exactly. In the next section, doubting reality. So maybe Chris.
Sure, I'll go for it.
Well,
is everyone happy? So some things we sort of talked about a little earlier. I really hope everyone else is as happy as I am. So it's kind of interesting as we've moved on this discussion that the conversations start taking a little bit more of a tilt as we discuss some of these other points.
Right.
Is the vault safe? And of course you have something, we're safe here in the vault. Right? Unless Mr. Handy explodes.
All right.
Can we leave the vault? If it were safe to leave the vault and live on the outside, would you ever want to?
Right.
Of course, the happy employees would say, never. Yeah. Must maintain optimism. Optimism. Must maintain my optimism.
Right.
Yeah, this is definitely for those living in confinement. That's one thing you'd have to be very much of, is having lots and lots of optimism.
Right. And then our next little section is awareness. It shows they don't show a lot of sign that they understand that they're living in a fantasy, but there are some moments that we go, oh, is this what it is? So Lear, please take over.
Awareness of fantasy versus reality. Wow, humans really did screw things up royally.
Yeah, they're in the wasteland. Doesn't look good.
I get this feeling sometimes like I'm being watched.
By us or by the overseer, right?
Yeah, like we're all just pawns in some game.
Yeah. That's also breaking fourth wall, I think.
Yep, it is.
Okay. All right. So the next section, rhetoric regarding difficult life. Chris, maybe.
All righty. The difficulty of life. Cram, cram, cram. Dinner night, beef Wellington and a bottle of Bordeaux. Just kidding. It's cram again.
That's what they get to eat. It's very sad.
That or Nuka-Cola. Asbestos. Asbestos is still here. A ceiling made of steel with copious amounts of asbestos. By the looks of it.
I just learned, because I don't know much about construction. I just learned that asbestos was still around until a few years ago. I mean, it was supposed to be, am I right that it was banned like 40 years ago or something? In building construction?
I don't know the time period on it, but it does seem like it was known issues. But yeah, it shows up in glue on tile. Adhesive for tile, it shows up in, used to show up in brake pads as well.
Right.
So it was used in a lot of different products. And so depending on how old the buildings are, there's still asbestos around.
Right. And if you think about the timeline, because of this alternate history, they're going by the 1950s ethos in their culture. So they added this in there. So you're thinking, you guys are living in asbestos buildings. It's horrible.
Oh yeah. Crossword question. Can you help with my crossword? 5-letter words that ends with T. Often terrible, always uncomfortable.
So you can go next, and the answer is right there.
The answer is vault. No.
Yeah, they're not very happy. You can tell they're not that.
But they've got smiles plastered on their face in their helmets, underneath behind their helmets and stuff.
Right.
I do like how no one's wearing safety goggles, though. By the way,
No,
yeah.
no.
People actually live out here. The Wasteland Journal, and here discovered a wounded sheriff. Trying to treat the wounded sheriff. He's in a lot of pain. I stopped the bleeding and calmed him down. Looked like he's going to make it. Earned 20 XP. Found 30 caps. Hard to imagine people actually living out here.
Right. So this was that little journal entry that I was showing you, is that when you throw your dwellers out, you can actually click and track them, and they will put the little journal entries. But as you can see, it's not great. I'm not sure why we are still surviving. In fact, after playing Fallout Shelter for a few months, I question why I'm playing the game. I don't know why. Why?
Because of your experimentation tendencies.
Yes. So depressing. Okay. So other rhetoric regarding death and meaninglessness. So Lear, please take over.
Death everywhere. I need an antidepressant. Oh my gosh. Well, I'd burn to death, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
Way to die.
Yeah, you would think that it's kind of weird for people to have these kind of conversations, and so innocuously, right? That it's normal to talk about burning to death in this kind of world.
I wonder how many humans have died in this place. Just curious. I mean, really.
Yeah, you can hear for the robot to ask this. I mean, you wonder how many countless human beings have died. I mean, that's the implication. So it's not all the things that we've seen so far with the happiness and the productivity and the efficiency. It's on the back of a lot of dead people and a lot of experimentation. So it's pretty sad.
Is it night or day? I have lost track.
Yeah. What's the point?
Well, that's Combler for gamblers everywhere.
Yeah,
hey, that's the game room. I love it.
Okay, next section. This is sad. So what I was saying earlier was that you can actually evict your dwellers if they don't make enough caps for you, right? Because we'll discuss that more later, but you can evict them, okay? And there is a little sense of resistance. So throughout the whole game, you don't get any resistance from the dwellers. So they will say the overseer is great. I love this place. I'm so happy. Efficiency is guaranteed. They say all kind of stuff. But when you evict them, that is the little moment when you see a little bit of resistance from those dwellers. So next. So Chris, your turn. Or
I'll go ahead.
Okay.
So leaving on free will. And our gentleman here says, let's get one thing straight. You're not evicting me. I'm leaving of my own free will. Uh-huh. Next up, skepticism. A better future. Underground. Yeah, right. Rue the day. You will rue the day you banish me. Rue the day. Apparently they needed to have security to let this one person leave.
Isn't it sad that people going in, right? And then you're throwing this guy out. And it's just sad, you know? Okay. Now we're actually going to talk a bit about the ethics that the game espouses. So please make a note, and I'll take over from this section here. I just want to emphasize, I'm not espousing these values. I'm not trying to say, yes, these are the values that we should learn from the game. I am trying to say that in the ethics of the game, the ethical system of the game itself, these are the values that the game is insisting that these are good things to follow. Okay, so please go next. Okay, so some of the things summarizing everything we've seen so far, right? Some of the values that the game is trying to say aligns with capitalism and authoritarianism. So one is maximizing profit is a raison d'etre, right? So raison d'etre is your reason for existing. That's it. Pretty much the whole game is maximizing profit. Profit should be valued over social good. So when you throw dwellers out, you don't care whether they do well or not. You only want them to do well if they maximize profit for you, okay? Third point, providing social good is justified if and only if the act enables humans to provide labor that increases profit. So everything is associated with profit. You only provide social good if it maximizes profit. A human life is good insofar as it can perform efficient labor for increasing profit. An associated value is that human value is measured by the profit it can generate. So those two ideas go hand in hand. Next point, authoritarianism is good because it maximizes profit. Now, what do we mean in terms of the game, right? The overseer have absolute authority over the dwellers. So if the overseer want to pull you in one room and say, go work on that, or go to the bar, or go to the play, whatever, okay? The dweller can never resist. You can just pull the little dwellers, throw them in a vault room, and all they do is they keep on working. Now, once you use them up, you throw them out. So you treat people as if they're Kleenex. You use them up, they're dirty, you don't want them anymore, you throw them out, okay? So authoritarianism maximizes profit in the sense that if you have absolute authority over all those little people and can tell them exactly what to do and they'll do exactly what you want them to do, then it helps with your profit line, right? And another point is that authoritarianism requires surveillance and oppression of the citizens. As the game shows, there's lots of surveillance cameras. But, you know, going back to Chris's point, lots of companies now have surveillance cameras everywhere. And Chris is right. If you're being monitored, you probably are more productive. So it's, yeah.
Yes, the eye is always upon you.
Yes, absolutely. So that kind of go around circle to our point here. Next. Right. Now, I want to introduce also another point. Okay. And again, emphasizing, so if some of us just joined us right now, I'm not suggesting that this is a value I'm trying to teach to you guys. I'm trying to say that the game is trying to say this. Okay. So efficiency warrants eugenics. So eugenics actually is a concept that came from philosophy, okay? Later on, it became a scientific term, but its root is in philosophy. And eugenics is the Greek word for good birth, okay? It's a social philosophy that originated from Plato, from the Plato's Republic. He mentioned certain things like this on how to create better societies via selective breeding. Okay, for eliminating undesirable human traits. So today, when we think about eugenics, it has to do with genetic manipulation, right? That's what people think of in terms of eugenics. But its root actually came from philosophy. So sometimes, this is one thing as I teach philosophy, and I love philosophy. It's one thing is people tend to uphold certain philosophers as their heroes. Okay, we do this. Okay, we say, I love this philosopher. You know, I love Nietzsche. I love Kant. Whoever you love. Okay, and we uphold, and we cannot possibly think that they could have values that might not be appropriate for today's world. That they might say certain things wrong. So to make a philosopher become a hero is not really exercising your philosophical thinking. You have to constantly question what they are teaching you, okay? So most countries in the world now have ended eugenics-based policies, but I do want to say that, for example, US still does eugenics policies, like incestual marriages are banned, and technically that's eugenics, right? That's part of eugenics. So in this game, the game actually, Fallout Shelter actually promote eugenics-based practices. So I just listed 3. There's more than this, but first of all, the overseer, which is you, the player, can selectively breed dwellers. You can put them together, whoever you want, and they can mate and make children, okay? The children of the selective breeding will carry the genetic traits of the parents. And the way the game demonstrates that is that the children tend to have the features of the parents, so the facial feature, the body feature, the hair, and so forth. The children can also inherit the special skills of the parents, right? So special, again, the strength, perception, endurance, charm, intelligence, agility, luck. That shows you how long I've been playing this game. But the special skills are inherited. So if the parents are wearing certain items on their body and they mate with somebody else, the children can actually get those special skills on the parents. So that's that's eugenics. Okay, so next. Okay, so I wanted to show an example of how corrupt this game is. So here's a scene where I put this man with two women in the vault room. Okay, this is the barrack room. And he says to one woman, he says, like an irradiated post-apocalyptic parasitic organism, you are under my skin. Okay, so that's kind of gross. On the left of him is, yeah. Did you want to say something, Chris?
Oh, no, I was just laughing.
That's kind of gross. There's lots of cheesy lines like this, okay? But on the left-hand side, you see that woman there is the girl that he just impregnated, okay? But I could use the same guy to impregnate another woman in the exact same room, and they're still laughing and smiling. It's extremely creepy to me, but this is actually what you do, okay? So one man can actually father many, 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 many children. If you want his looks and want his stats, you can do that, okay? Next. Okay. Now, also in this particular game, we learned that capitalism is a justification for ageism. So ageism, as we know today, is to discriminate against people because they're older. Okay. So people get fired or they get less wages because we associate that if you're older, somehow you're not as good as the young folks, right? So that's ageism. So this game actually promotes ageism-based practices. So one of the things is, like I was saying, is that the overseer can evict a dweller from the vault. For no reason whatsoever, you can just throw somebody out, okay? Once the dweller reaches level 50, which is the max level of every dweller, okay, the dweller can no longer generate any caps, profit for the overseer. So I might be giving a lot of the gameplay away for leader, so I feel bad about that. But when the dweller gets to level 50, right, they no longer can generate caps. So what you do is you can say, okay, I can keep them in the vault. If you want to be an ethical player, you say, I'll keep you, man. I'll keep you around. And I'm not going to make any money off you, but you'll stick around. Or you can say, you know what? I'm going to throw you out and make another baby. I'm going to take somebody else that's better and throw you out. Okay. So that's the problem with replacing, train younger dweller and replace the older dweller. All right. We're using them to replace the older dweller. Now, here's another thing that's scary. When Chris was reading the notes on eviction for us, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but when you evict the dweller, they're stripped of their armor, they're stripped of weapons. So basically what we're doing is a death sentence. They served the vault for basically the equivalent of 50 years, because we can think of the level as the age, right? They've been serving the vault all this time. And by the time we use them up, we throw them out. There's no benefit or anything. We don't even give them like a parting gift or food. They are thrown out with nothing. So we basically are killing them. Okay. So in this sense, this is what I mean by capitalism justifies ageism, because for the sake of money, you'll throw away those people who've been loyal to you all this time. Next. Okay. Now, with all that said, I just explained the values of the game is expressing to us, right? But now I wanted to apply one ethical theory, and there's really many ethical theories I can apply to interpret the game, but I'm going to introduce one for this webcast today, which is egoism, to examine this game. So please go next. Okay, so egoism is a philosophy, okay? And it's an ethical theory. And by the way, the Latin ego means I. So egoism is the belief in me, myself, I, okay? It's an ethical theory that presents either a descriptive or a normative position that an act can be moral or rational if the act maximizes one's self-interest. So I know in modern time, when we think of ego, we're thinking of, Sigmund Freud, right? The idea of you have too much ego or ego-driven thing. Well, obviously, Freud, as well as the entire discipline of psychology, is influenced by philosophy. So it actually came out of philosophy and it became its own thing later. But what I'm talking about is not a psychological understanding of egoism, but a philosophical understanding of egoism. So there are three types of egoism. First is psychological egoism. So it's a descriptive position in a meta-ethics. Okay, so meta-ethics is the study of where did our ethical thinking comes from? So it's not what we should or shouldn't do, right? So it's not a policy. It's not saying you should do this or do that. A meta-ethics is a study of where our ethical thinking or morality comes from. Where could it be from? Okay. So psychological egoism is a descriptive position that a person's desires or is motivated to act only to maximize her own self-interest. So it's the belief that I will only act, every act that I do in my life is to benefit myself and nobody else. That's the natural state of being, okay? Second type of egoism is called ethical egoism, which is a normative position. So normative in philosophy means to normalize something, to become a behavior, to say this is the right act, right thing to do. So that's called a normative position. And the belief that actions are morally right if the actions maximize one's self-interest. So in this sense, morality is determined by whether the act that you do benefit yourself. So if it doesn't benefit me, myself, it's not moral, okay, under this ethical theory. The third type is rational egoism, which is the belief that actions are rational, right? That it's logical somehow, it makes sense if it maximizes one's self-interest. So I just introduced really briefly of hundreds of years of theory here. I just wanted to briefly introduce these concept to you. So please go next. Okay, so egoism is an opposition to altruism. Okay, so altruism is basically the belief that one would or should act for the sake of others. So you're constantly thinking about what to do for other people. And altruism, an altruistic person believes that that is the morally right thing to do, that we do things to benefit other people, not ourselves. So naturally, egoism is in opposition to altruism, right? So for a psychological egoist, they believe that altruism or thinking altruistically is very, very unnatural for the individual who desire to act solely for their own welfare. So where did the egoists come off thinking this, right? Because they examine human nature. They see how people are selfish. So they go, well, that's probably the natural state of what people are supposed to be. So they believe that if you act for other people or do something for other people, that is against your self-interest, which is illogical, which is irrational. You shouldn't be doing that. So here's an example to help us understand this distinction, okay? So here's a scenario. And actually, maybe Lear, because I talked for a while. Lear, do you mind reading this example for us?
A fireman rushes into a burning building to save a child, even though he knows that the building will likely explode within minutes due to a gas leak. The fireman was able to save the child's life, but he dies soon after due to third-degree burns and carbon monoxide poisoning. How would an altruist versus an egoist respond to the above scenario?
Absolutely. So please go next. And Lear, can you please continue for us there?
An egoist versus altruist response to a scenario. An altruist would say that the fireman acted altruistically to save the child's life while foregoing his own. The fireman rushed into the burning building, knowing that it was about to explode, because he acted for the sake of the child. An egoist would say that the fireman acted in self-interest when he saved the child's life, because he only acted for the sake of upholding his own reputation. The fireman rushed into the burning building, knowing that it was about to explode, but because he wanted to showcase his heroism. His death was unfortunate, but it preserved his honor as a fireman.
Right. Thank you so much. As you can see, this is a complete opposition, right? Altruist versus egoist. So with that frame, with a basic understanding of what egoism is, okay, I use that to observe what's happening with the overseer. So this is what I said there, okay? In the fallout shelter, the overseer, which is you, the player, can make ethical or unethical decisions at will without any intervention from the dwellers. So the dwellers never protest. They never say, no, you can't do this to me. The overseer has absolute power, right? Then the second point is that the overseer asks the dwellers to perform various jobs, all for the purpose of maximizing his or her own self-interest, which is to gain profit. So when those dwellers are saying, oh, the overseer will protect us, right? They will do all these things for us. From an egoistic perspective, right? The overseer is only doing this to make sure you will not die on him or her so that they could continue to profit off your labor. Okay. Third is that the overseer maintains the vault to secure the dwellers' lives. And similar point I'm making here is that because dwellers are needed to complete jobs and maximize production. So he or she is motivated to protect the vault and the dwellers to benefit his own welfare. And this is through the egoistic lens to understand what's happening with the overseer. So we can go next. Okay, so we have come to the last slide. This is actually the last slide. And I leave this question for our panel because I talked for a long time today. But this is the question, right? Through the lens of egoism, how will we understand the motivation of the dwellers in working for the authoritative and oppressive overseer? So bring it back to the panel.
Survival.
Yeah, survival. Yeah, I agree. It's in your self-interest to be alive.
Right. So in terms of survival, right, that the things that they're saying, for example, to say, well, the overseer is great and so forth. I guess there's a comfort, right, when we say that, because in philosophy, we can't get away with seeking comfort. We're always questioning something. So the idea that it is very attractive to follow an authoritarian figure, right, because they have all the answers. You don't have to think for yourself. You follow what they say and you'll be okay. And you can believe in this delusion or the fantasy that you're always going to be safe, like what the dwellers are saying. Oh, this place is safe, right? They ask all this. But I also showed, as the previous screenshots were showing, is that they're constantly being attacked by mole rats, rat scorpion, rat roaches, ghouls. So the vault is not really that secure, right? Because they can dig through, hurt them, go out. So the vaulters are constantly dying inside the vault. So this discomfort that they're seeking, right, is disconcerting. And I can't help, right, as I play games and do everything, I can't help but reflect on what's happening in this game as a metaphor for what's happening in today's political climate. A lot of these things that we're talking about is resurging again. And that's disquieting, at least for myself. I don't know how you guys feel about the game so far.
Like what the game's left me with is it feels like there should be a second part to it that we're not seeing. For instance, why is the game so focused, or does it have the potential to be focused on profitability? Where do the profits go? So, I mean, typically in most corporations, there's shareholders who you're increasing shareholder value, and there's payouts and distributions of dividends and different things like that. Well, the question is that as an overseer, if in fact the overseer is human, you could look at it as maybe it is Mr. Handy is actually the overseer, or it's a robot. So it's just, is it just simply a algorithm that's running to, if we step back a little bit and going, is the overseer really just sort of an algorithm that's running to benefit a owner or founder or stakeholders who are no longer present? And so some of the books I read with the different cyberpunk, and especially looking at Charles Stross, there's a lot of look at what happens whenever humans disappear, and you have machinery that's built to benefit humans, but when the human disappears, the machinery continues on. Right. And that's almost like it's almost there with the game. So for me, it's really intriguing to see, because it's like, okay, so what happens if truly the overseer is just absent? And it's just machinery running, right. And it's running a preset program that was coded for it, and it just keeps going and going and going and going, even though the actual beneficiary who was originally built to serve is no longer around.
Right. No, that's intriguing, Chris. I didn't even think about the aspect that maybe it's just a big old algorithm that's running the whole place. Because you're supposed to be the player. You're supposed to play as the overseer. So they converted the formula, right? From originally you're playing as a dweller, and this mobile game you're playing as the overseer. So I was focused on that. But the possibility, right, that maybe there's no one there because the overseer room is always empty. There's no one really ever there. That pretty much, it's just a big old ant farm rat race experiment. That's what
exactly.
It is. Yeah.
it's almost like a grand farce too, because you have to ask yourself. I mean, bottle caps are the currency. Everything's Nuka Cola. It's got this satirical, and then you have to ask yourself, when you're building buildings and you spend your caps, who are you giving the money to?
Right.
You know.
Right. It's just, you spend caps, right, to build the rooms, right? But yeah, who's collecting them? And the thing, and from the original canon, if we go by the canon, is that the vault, this particular vault might be built by Vault-Tec Vault. So Vault-Tec is that a private contractor that the U.S. government hired in the game, right? So if it's built by
the very
Vault-Tec,
inefficient, very inefficient contractor.
yeah.
Instead of 4,000, you only made 122.
Yeah, you're like, what the hell happened? It was the story is really rich. There's like political factions that fought over, because the 13th Commonwealth kind of dissolved into this plutocracy, so it's like one guy, like, wealthy family controlling everything. So it dissolved into that. So, you wonder if these vaults, like when they're spending money, like what Lear was just asking, basically, maybe it goes back to the US government. Maybe all these people, but who knows, right? If it's all wasteland, what's the point of all this? I don't know.
So the only thing after is death, taxes, and apparently auditors. Go ahead and make sure you're still doing your work. Otherwise, you'll be audited. No.
Yeah.
That's what they need. They need rad auditors. So irradiated auditors will show up. Irradiated IRS agents will show up if you're not profitable.
Oh gosh, I don't know. I will keep playing it since I've been stuck on it for months. But as a regular practice, and I just end it on this note, because I hope this was an interesting game for everybody to examine. As a regular practice, because I do game studies, I play at least 2 new games every month just to get myself used to playing different games and study them. But understand that I'm not saying this is the best game ever. The idea is that it's easy to play. It's free to play, so there's no cost upfront unless you really want to spend money, right, to convert things into caps and so forth. But this game is easy because your students can adopt it. It could be a mobile version. You could play on Steam, you can play on Windows and so forth. It will be a good experiment to see if the students get some of the concept that we grabbed today, or even if you just give them one concept and see if they can actually see it when they play the game. And that's it for me.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for watching, and thank you, Sherry and Lear and Kay as well for hanging in there and doing a wonderful presentation. And we look forward to more next month. So see everyone later. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.